And the Turtle Man's opening, he's swinging around in the chair. And it's really funny.
That's good.
The episode with Greg is, I don't know if you saw the video of Dan in the shrimp suit. I'll have to send it to you. It's so funny. And then I'm talking about it with Greg, and then it goes to, so I do the impression going, there's birds made a home in it. I do a really good impression of it for some strange reason. And then the clip after it, it's brilliant. I'll probably put it out as a preview because it's too good. In the zone. Are you ready?
Ready.
It's nice to be strange, but you're probably sat there thinking, she's really
I'm no stranger to strangeness.
Never coming back on this podcast again.
With all 1.8 million questions, there's not going to be anything for me to talk about if I come on this podcast again.
No, there's always questions. Always things to learn about.
Just mess with you.
Always things to talk about.
We'll see.
You say that and you're like, you do talk a lot, Alex. So I don't know. I think we've covered. How long have we just been sat here chatting? What is that with my voice? Now it's just kind of like, no, I'm all talked out. That's it. Episode cancelled.
We'll just reschedule.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, loads of time. You don't have a busy schedule or anything, so
no, not at all.
Stuff to do.
Not even a little bit.
Content to make.
No. Yep, I'm quitting today. No. This is the podcast I'm making my announcement.
That's an exclusive. Nice.
That's it.
Ooh, that would make a very good clickbait, wouldn't it? I don't know.
Quitting today.
I don't want
It's over. Jack's World Wildlife in the trash.
Oh my gosh, is that an exclusive?
Exclusive. You're hearing it here for the first time that day.
Reporting live. Jack's Adventures and no more.
Really, you need like an AI, little like subtitles for like what I'm actually doing. Descriptive explanations like for like TV when you turn those on and it's like such and so goes and sits down
like the
windowsill.
Yeah.
They're looking menacingly at someone.
Alex is talking nonsense. Jack is sitting patiently. Jack's cat wants him to get off the chair, as it is hers.
Yep. The other one's just kind of apathetically wandering.
Classic cat. He's like, yes, you summoned me.
Come here.
Food. That's all the humans are good for. And scritches, of course.
That's right.
We're going to start now.
Okay. Give me in.
Okay. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to get it wrong. I'm very embarrassed. I don't know why I said the other thing. I don't know.
Come in a little closer. Center it. I'm like mirror.
I'm going to read the intro and everyone's going to be like, what's up with his head? Where did his neck go? I have got it written down as well here. So.
Perfect.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. What? Why you distracted me? You can't laugh at the intro. Oh. That's where you're happy. You're happy with that as the intro, that phallic-looking position.
Phallic-looking position. Precisely.
Well, I'm not saying explicitly. The
phallic-looking. There's a hyphen in there somewhere.
All right. Don't laugh at me this time. Don't distract me.
I was being friendly. I was just welcoming the audience with a smile.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reptile Rendezvous podcast. I'm your host, Alex and all our animals. This is the second time we're doing this, and I told him not to laugh, and he's laughing. Today we have a really awesome guest joining us. We are thrilled to welcome Jack from Jack's World of Wildlife. Because I got it wrong one time by accident, and now I've got to make sure that I say it right. Jack is an educator, entertainer, and so much more. Also gamer. We did nerd out for about half an hour about gaming, which was very fun. Jack, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing quite well.
It's weird, isn't it, when you've been talking for like just over an hour and then you go,
we have to...
How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. I've just been hanging out.
Yes. Oh, she wants to be in it too. The star of the show. Oh, bye-bye.
So now everybody's going to be...
She's camera shy.
Where the cat went in the intro. There was a cat in the intro. Where'd it go?
Purely just for the clickbait.
Yeah, that was just to get you people hooked and interested.
Cats.
It worked.
Well, we do have a exclusive. I was like, did I put Jack's Wildlife Adventures twice? Because that would be embarrassing. It was just to annoy you, actually, because I'm a rascal.
Mission accomplished.
Read his name wrong. That would be funny.
Yeah, for the bit. That'll be great. And then you think Jack's World of Wildlife was wrong. And then it's like exclusive podcast with Jack's Wildlife Adventures, wherever you got that from.
I blame Andrew because wildlife.
Affected your mind with that.
Adventures. We were talking about him. Shout out to Andrew. We love you, bird.
Is what it is.
It is indeed. So, tell us about yourself and what you do.
My name is Jack, and I travel around the world to film.
I've just realised that question was down at the bottom. I forgot to take it out.
I was wondering if you...
I am not doing that intro.
Where can we find...
I'm not doing that intro. Jump right in there, even though you're quitting. So,
like, oh my gosh. Well, you could tell who I am if this was showing up. So I'm Jack Sword of Wildlife, Jack for short. I travel all over the world to film creatures mostly. Stinging ones, biting ones, big ones, little ones, dangerous ones, cute ones, small ones, round ones, sharp ones, scaled ones, slimy ones, ones with exoskeletons, ones with no skeletons at all. That's pretty much what I do. I do this to teach people primarily about said plethora of creatures because I like them and a lot of people don't like them and some people don't even know about them to like them. And so that's kind of where I come in. And I primarily release my main stuff on YouTube, but I'm also pretty present on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram as well because there's people everywhere that need to see my stuff about creatures.
They need to. It's imperative.
Imperative. Really, it's a public service, what I'm doing. And I travel domestically in the United States and also internationally, all over the... It's mirrored, so it's taking me a while. World. All over the world. So
on your adventures?
On my wildlife adventures, you could say. But it really is my world of wildlife. So that's kind of more the angle that I approach it from. So I travel. I just got back from Arizona 2 weeks ago. I went to Australia in January, February. I'm going to Australia again in November.
Jealous.
And then again in January because I can't get enough of Australia for some reason.
That's just... Can I
go
instead?
It's a lot of money to go to Australia.
Do you think they'll fall for it? I used your ID and your passport.
You have to kind of maybe take a Sharpie, maybe some eyelash extensions. Just kind of...
I was going to say, I don't think I could grow a beard in time. I don't think I can grow a beard, so we might run into an issue there.
This is all prosthetic. I can't grow any hair myself, actually.
I mean, I've got enough hair. I can tie up my hair in my hair.
Oh my gosh, it's eerie.
We've got plenty to work with.
How close that looks. If you order a handful of the shirts,
basically the same person now.
You could probably fly right under the radar, for sure.
Subtle plug.
I just got one of those.
I'm gonna order one.
Kind of vibe anybody could really, I mean, Scarlett Johansson could probably play me in a movie, and no one would bat an eye. A movie about my life.
You've just got one of those faces. It's very. That would be pretty cool.
Telling me.
Wild, adventurous life.
My wild, adventurous life. That is me. That's who I am.
That's what you.
I'm about. And the rest of this podcast is just more going to be me expounding on what little information I've given the audience so far and answering questions. Is expounding a word? Yeah, expounding is a word. Expound.
Is it actually?
Yeah. Expounding meaning.
I thought you were trying to say
present and explain.
Expanding.
In detail. Expound.
Well, I never. My apologies, sir.
So they call me an educator.
That's a really good word.
Here I am. I'm doing it. It's just fluid. It just comes out of me. The educational juices are flowing.
Erupts.
Yes. So you're welcome. Expound. There you go. Brand new word.
People are just going to be like, I'm here for the education. It's the Anthony Pierleone episode all over again. They're just talking
take some fish oil pills, maybe some Ritalin where applicable. Have a healthy, balanced meal right before so you can really soak it all up because it's coming at you. Speed of light coming at you.
YouTube will have chapters, so I think it's quite entertaining.
Cut up this board of 6-hour podcast special and you want to just take little bites.
It would be 6 hours if I started.
There we go.
If I started filming when we started talking.
Yeah,
the longest episode yet.
Pretty hefty. We've officially started now. to the real meat of it.
One of the things that is important to you is to learn about different animals' behaviors. What are some common misconceptions people have about how certain animals behave, and where do you think these ideas come from?
Well, it's interesting because most of the misconceptions that I run into almost always have a root in fear. Most animals that you can find that have a pretty prevalent presence of misconceptions around them are animals that people generally are afraid of. Spiders, sharks, snakes, almost all of these animals could inflict harm on a person. And so a lot of the times people automatically assume that that's exactly what these animals are trying to do. Somebody might see a spider on the wall of their bedroom and they're freaking out. Whereas, of course, I wouldn't blink an eye. Why? Because I know that the
Same.
spider's not in my bedroom to hurt me. It's not going to hurt me. It's fairly easy to capture and remove. And so my framing of that experience is much different from somebody else because of those misconceptions rooted in fear. And so I think a lot of these misconceptions and ideas come from a place of fear, but also of kind of wild imagination. Some of these misconceptions don't even originate in reality, or at least not in the sense that many people might think. For example, something like a shark being a man-eating, soulless, cold-blooded creature, people would automatically assume just because this animal maybe has attacked people in the past, maybe has a potential for maybe killing, maybe even consuming a person, that automatically that must mean that we're their primary target. Anytime you get into the ocean, you're at risk of really being at serious danger of being attacked by a shark. When in reality, this is just wild imagination. And that can play into pop culture, that can play into, what our parents or grandparents tell us about something they heard from one of their friends 50 years ago. There's this kind of whirlwind of what kind of can shape these less desirable or creepier, crawlier, or more dangerous animals in our minds. It can kind of elevate them past the point of reality and transform them into a monster movie type thing. Because a lot of these creatures that we have misconceptions about, a lot of different types of media plays on that type of previous misconception. They know people are generally afraid of spiders. They know people are generally afraid of snakes, alligators, crocodiles, sharks. And that's why a lot of the time when you see these animal horror movies like Jaws or The Meg or that one
Snakes on a
ridiculous
plane.
Snakes on a Plane, or even that ridiculous, it came out kind of recently, that alligator horror movie about some killer alligator going around and attacking people. And I'm like, folks,
I've not heard of that one.
it's called like The Shallows or something like that. Anyway, it's all just to prove the point of people are pretty creative. People are fairly imaginative. And it's easy to look at something that's got big, sharp teeth or a viral venom or all these legs, and see something that's scary that could potentially harm you. But these misconceptions, the really only way to treat them is education. And that's part of my main brand, is getting a hold of people, taking advantage of that initial response of, I'm scared of this, I think it's deadly, I think it's dangerous, I think it's going to hurt me, and creating that as the catalyst to bring somebody in to see me working with something dangerous or deadly. I work with venomous snakes, I work with sharks, I work with crocodilians, I work with spiders, all sorts of things on my channel. And a lot of the comments that I get back are people going, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I would never in a million years do this." Or, "This guy, he's just, something must be off about this one, or he must have, found a captive one." And I said, "No, folks, this is truly how these animals behave when they don't feel in danger, when they're not, fleeing for their lives or having to protect themselves. These animals are animals, the same as any other type of animal that you might see that's less scary to you or less objectively dangerous." So people go, you could just as easily get your arm torn to shreds by, an orangutan going on some kind of rainforest jungle walk in Borneo. You could just as easily get bitten by, a macaque going taking pictures on temple steps in India or Cambodia or wherever. So it's like people have this idea that just because something's a little scary or a little creepy or a little crawlier, that it's inherently more dangerous or, out to get you in a real sense, when in reality, it's just not true at all. Of course, there can be more and less dangerous animals, but those misconceptions can really paralyze people. And most of the time, they're at best founded in a half truth, which is generally just a misunderstanding of animal behavior and, can be cured in a sense by just education. And I feel like I am seeing a lot more of that in pop culture and stuff, a lot more positive sentiments towards sharks in particular. A lot of people are just kind of over this sort of fear hype cloud that's just been kind of hanging over since Jaws kind of came out, just because people are really starting to see that, we need those keystone species. We need those, critically important animals to have healthy ecosystems, to have healthy oceans. It doesn't help anybody to protect ourselves by getting rid of our important dangerous animals just to kind of have a little bit of, peace of mind about venturing into their sorts of habitats. They're not interested, generally in approaching people at all. And if they are, it's generally out of curiosity. Very rarely, sometimes they'll attack somebody, but that's not like their MO.
One of the things that bothers me is the term shark infested waters. Because they're not infested, they're just shark inhabited waters.
That's where they live.
They're not infested. That's just where they live. Yeah. It's like saying human infested city. And it's like, well, of course there's going to be humans in the city. There's going to be, you don't say fish infested waters when there's loads of fish there.
Yeah, that pop culture whirlwind of when we talk about these things, what comes to mind? What's just like, that's just regular, that's just a saying. Shark infested waters. That's just, you can see that in cartoons.
It is. That's just
just a saying. People say, oh, today we're going out snorkeling in shark infested waters. And somebody might not even be meaning to make that a negative connotation. They just might be saying, oh, sharks around
That's why I mean, it's so normalized.
We apply certain attributes to these animals that, for better or for worse, mostly come from just a state of imagination. We see Jaws and it's like, oh, this is a pest control problem almost. Like it's an issue that these animals are here where these people are and we need to remove them. And that's not the case at all. When we say shark infested waters, it's really a branch off of that.
Shark inhabited.
Yeah. You're going, okay, if sharks are an issue and a significant real danger to people, which of course we know they aren't, then them being in proximity to people is a problem that needs to be fixed. And that's where you kind of get that type of saying that springs out of that way of thinking, that way of kind of programming us through conscious and subconscious misconceptions. Where you think something about an animal, it's been,
it's not how can we live with them, it's how can we get rid of them is usually the go-to for how can we get rid of them so that they're not infested. They're not infesting our waters anymore. And it's not. We're just living. They're just living. Basic respect. We need to learn to just live with them. If you don't disturb them, most likely you're not going to have an issue with it. And you brought up media, which segues nicely into the question, how do you think media representations of animals influence public perception of their behavior?
This, I think, is one of the most important aspects of human and animal, even just wildlife and conservation in general. Just as important as representation and equality in people in media is, it's the same thing with animals. If you're a kid growing up and instead of growing up on Steve Irwin, for example, who was just overwhelmingly positive towards the animals, their appearance, all that type of stuff, and instead you're watching more like Coyote Peterson, where they're really leaning into perhaps a fear angle or really hyping stuff up, making it seem really scary and dangerous. Two kids, maybe they started off completely the same, both interested in animals, both interested in wildlife. One of them cultures of respect and appreciation, even for dangerous and scary stuff. The other one, they're afraid to go to school because they just learned about this tarantula hawk wasp, and they go to school in Phoenix, Arizona, and they're afraid now that they've seen somebody really ham up this experience with a tarantula hawk wasp, that now they're worried that's going to happen to them. And that same spark of curiosity can completely take these two incredibly similar individuals, take them down completely different paths. And that's why it's so important to understand how important media is with wildlife. I dropped out of college essentially on my own to start my business, to start up the YouTube and all that stuff, because number one, it's a ticking time clock. Like, there are ecosystems and things that I've even been to that are drastically changed just during my short, 7-8 year career doing this type of stuff. Some of these ecosystems, some of these species, we have a limited amount of time that we can see them or see them in their fullest, potential at this current time. And so for me, although it'd be great if I could have gone all the way through and gotten my degree in wildlife biology and evolutionary biology, but for right now, I felt like, man, I'm running out of time. And also, this type of stuff is so important. And people can poo-poo on whatever kind of mission they want and say, oh, well, I think that academia is really the only way to make any positive change, or I think that this is really the only way to make positive change. But the issue is that if we're not reaching enough people on as many facets as possible, we're losing ground, basically. If I can't flood the internet with positive media, positive PR for venomous snakes and crocodiles and sharks and spiders and centipedes, if I can't do that, then somebody else is going to capitalize on the innate sensation of wildlife. And they're going to take that more kind of Coyote Peterson route of drumming stuff up, making it seem really scary, and reaching a lot of people, but in a way that it reinforces some of those negative misconceptions, not dispelling those misconceptions, but kind of leaning into them and saying, oh, this is really scary, and this is really dangerous, and this is, and there's a place to state that, because wildlife, there are people that disagree with me, but wildlife is sensational. You don't have to be, a purist and only watching, David Attenborough sit calmly and explain the natural history. Of course, I love that type of content. But for your average person or for a kid, you're going to be losing huge amounts. I mean, there's tons of people that, have an issue with me doing hands-on education because, it stresses animals
You know
out.
what you're doing.
We should just leave them alone. We should film them from 100 yards away. And I say, well, of course, there are instances where handling an animal is not in the best case scenario. But a lot of the time, this is the only time that people are introduced to different ideas about certain animals that they have misconceptions about. And sometimes it's the only time that they ever actually see that proof of concept. When I tell somebody snakes aren't out
to
kill
them, yeah.
And I film them from
if you film them from far away,
they're going to say, what do you mean?
How are they going to?
Like, what do you mean they're not aggressive?
How are they going to learn?
This one can't even see you from where you're filming it. And, of course, again, I'm not advocating for everybody to go out and pick up and grab and catch whatever, but I'm saying that there is a huge aspect of that that's super important to people and super important for kids to grow up with a healthy respect of wildlife and not a fear of wildlife. Because if they have a healthy respect and they know, okay, well, I know that professionals could handle this type of thing, but I know that I don't have to be afraid of it innately. If I come across a rattlesnake on a hiking trail, I'm not picking up a rock and trying to smash it because it's a dangerous animal. I'm going to remember, oh, wait, Jack's World of Wildlife said that they just want to keep moving on. So I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to let it cross the trail. And then boom, you just had a positive interaction. And you're not handling it. You're not jumping around. You're not trying to scare it. You're not doing anything other than you're keeping yourself safe. You're not going out of your way to try and harm an animal or do whatever to it. But you understand after I've shown you, and there's plenty of other great hands-on science communicators as well. After we can show you, the proof of concept there, that this is a misconception that you have in your mind, and let me show you how it is a misconception. And so that's why I think media representation, I mean, again, I'm biased because I work with education in media, of course, that's my medium that I use. But I think it's super important, and it's part of my life trajectory, consuming things like From the Wild Kratts and the Kratt brothers, Jeff Corwin, Steve Irwin, David Attenborough as well. Like, these people in media can help hone and foster that appreciation and interest, that I think is just so incredibly important. And that's part of the main reasons why I even started my channel back in 2018, was because for the longest time I had this idea in my head of like, you know what, I bet I could do something similar to that, kind of a Jeff Corwin style type, you know, hands-on reptiles, amphibians, creepy crawlies, that type of thing. But I was like, but you need a whole crew for that. You need camera people, you need whatever. And it wasn't until kind of Coyote Peterson, Brave Wilderness started kind of bubbling up and over that I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been stung by already a small portion of what he was hamming up and going crazy and writhing around and all the comments are people just like, oh my gosh, better you than me. If I see one of those, I'm crushing it. I'm stepping on it. This is so scary. I'm never going to Costa Rica. I'm never going to Arizona. I'm never going. Well, fear. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like this is ridiculous. These are some of my favorite.
It's just the opposite of
what you should be doing.
I'm
like, I get, I
antagonize it. What do you think is going to happen?
It's also part that you're creating wildlife sensationalism with a negative connotation. So people are always going to assume, oh, if this is really engaging and sensationally presented, then it's got to be bad, because that's what Coyote Peterson does. And that's something that I'm super against, because I'm like, I'm animated and I'm excited to find stuff. And I think it's really sensational to find a super venomous creature, find a super dangerous one, or the most painfully stinging ant in the world.
It's always irresponsible about it.
Yeah, you have to add that layer in because it's exciting. The whole planet is just bubbling over and just crawling with amazing stuff. And to kind of reduce it down to sterile, academia root, pure in its purest form, is a disservice, in my opinion, if what you're doing is trying to reach a general audience. Because most people are not animal people. Most people are not going to, care about the average, katydid or, bullet ant or whatever. Like, you have to reach these people where they're at. And sometimes that's using a sensational species, the most venomous whatever, or the deadliest whatever, but not distilling that kind of misconception and misrepresentation of the animal, but understanding that that's what people are seeing. When they see a great white shark, they think deadliest shark in the world. So how can you take those people and teach them something else? It's not by making the world's most boring great white shark video about every fact you could possibly know and the real statistics, and all that stuff is great information.
Yeah, that's sort of a niche audience.
Yeah, you can thread into that sort of tapestry, but you've got to meet those people where they are. And I think that's something that a lot of people, even in my community that I see, people that are real purist or real like, oh, it was a great, 90s, 2000s era thing for people to do hands-on presentation. It was a great whatever for people to do this and that. But now we just are we're growing and we need to move past that. And I'm saying there's entire generations of people that still need that type of thing. There's to be interested and to foster that. These are people that grow up to be, and they might grow up to say, oh, you know what, me personally, I don't need to be handling stuff. I don't need to be go out and catching things or, roughly, trying to grab a snake off of a log. I can take a picture from where I'm standing. But, you want this to be a tactile, accessible thing for people. And I think if they don't see that in media, then they're going to grow up fairly apathetic and removed from the wildlife space, from the conservation space in general. If they don't care to go out, if they don't think they can go out and look for stuff, even if they're catching it or not, you're losing these curious, growing minds of children, of teenagers, of even adults that otherwise, would be strong warriors for wildlife and conservation and care. Like, the main reasons I care so much about wildlife is because it's my life. I
Yeah.
want to go and see these animals and be in their habitat. And if that habitat, yeah, it's on the other side of the world. Yeah, I live 8,000 miles away from it. But if I'm not protecting and advocating for the health of the planet as a whole, then that could be potentially something that could be taken off the table for me forever. Seeing that species or going diving on the Great Barrier Reef or doing whatever. That's it
That's
makes
the
it makes
goals for me.
right, and it makes all of that wildlife stuff personal. Because otherwise, most people say, "What? Okay, it's sad that these rhinos in this park are getting hunted, but
Yeah, but
what do I
yeah.
care? What am I going to do? I don't run into rhinos on a daily basis, you know." And it condenses this whole thing in to if you care a lot about where you live and the wildlife that lives there, then it bleeds into everything else. It bleeds into I care about what's going on in Texas. I care about
The
what's going on in
ecosystem and how they help that. Yeah.
exactly. And you can be as involved on every possible level as you can, and it's because of that initial influence, that inspiration. I think is super super important, and I feel like a lot of people, by trying to do the right thing or the purely most ethical thing. Like, yes, of course, going and catching a wild animal exerts stress on that animal. But I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of comments of people saying, "Hey, you know what? These videos have really changed my mind about spiders. I don't kill spiders at all anymore. I used to smash every single one of
That
them that
must
was
feel great as well.
and now I don't do it. I pick them up. You've taught me that."
Yeah.
And so you can say, okay, net positive
Lovely.
here, stressing out one animal for that video that saved hundreds of spiders or hundreds of snakes. You're going,
The
what are
long
we really
term.
looking at
Yeah.
here? Because if I never picked up that animal and really showed people, it literally does not want to bite me. It's just trying to get away from me. Yes, of
Yeah.
course, it was a stressful situation, but these animals are dealing with predation events. I mean, this could be an animal that a hawk could swoop down and try and grab and drop, and it slithers away and it survives.
Yeah.
And that's just part of being a wild animal. And so, of course, I'm going to do my best to handle things as carefully and as calmly as possible. I'm not going to take hours and hours and hours manhandling something to get all the shots that I would need.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is an important thing to still have in this kind of community and this kind of bubble, this wildlife bubble, because I do think that it helps people to really connect those dots in their mind about venomous snakes, about spiders, about all sorts of stuff. Because if I'm telling you, yeah, you don't do this, but I'm going to handle a black widow to show you that they're incredibly timid. They're not interested in biting. And you can see, I'm not just blowing hot air. I'm showing you right now that when this animal doesn't feel threatened, it's not going to bite. So if you don't even touch it, you're in zero danger at all. Because a lot of people just assume they see something,
Just
they think it's
leave
going
it.
to be
Yeah.
dangerous.
Just leave it.
I mean, we live in a media age, basically, and it's the most important thing
Yeah.
that can influence people about wildlife and animals in either direction. And so I think when we have too many people that want to kind of reduce it into this pure, perfect situation for every single animal and kind of cut out a lot of that meat and a lot of that heart out
It's
of
not
it.
even realistic. Yeah.
It's not realistic. And
Yeah.
it's like, we're not talking about filmmaking in Yellowstone where you can get all the shots you need of bison. I'm not going out and choking a bison to film a video with it. I'm talking about I caught a frog or a snake or whatever. Yeah, I might have nitrile gloves for the frog so that it's not harmed by being handled. But the frog itself,
Exactly. Being responsible and
right. It's like
yeah.
you can be responsible and you can still capture and handle animals without negatively impacting them on a serious level and also their public perception, because somebody's going to come along and capitalize on the sensational aspects of nature, and they might not be as ethical about the presentation, because that's what really I'm talking about more so is we need to be ethical about the presentation of information, and we need to focus on that as our main sort of catalyst for science communication with animals. Of course, you want to be ethical and mindful of the animals that you're working with. That's not what I'm not talking about disregarding that, but I'm saying that when we kind of pedestal, complete wild animal comfort, a wild animal is not comfortable the second it's been spotted by you. And if we pedestal that over anything, we can lose a lot of that ability to reach people in a meaningful way. And again, clarifying, I'm not talking about going out and manhandling and doing whatever you want to wild animals. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm going to talk about a global permit or licensing system or something that says these people know what they're doing and they're allowed to, and these people, they're just coming in and wild boysing, going crazy, catching stuff, manhandling it. These people need to be, punished, because there are people that do a lot of this stuff illegally or are harassing the wildlife and doing whatever. Because again, we live in a media age. Stuff like this can blow up on TikTok, on Instagram, and a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference
I was gonna say
between what somebody is doing in a horribly unethical and terrible way and what I'm doing, because the average person really can't tell the difference. It's me. I can tell what the difference is between some 13-year-old kid going out and just grabbing, snakes by the neck and holding them up and catching possums off of a tree, versus what I'm doing, carefully handling an animal to educate about it. But to the average person, they're seeing, I just like wildlife stuff. So I follow this guy and I follow this guy and I follow this guy. So it's a growing issue because there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of hands in the pot. Media is very important for public outreach. I know we have our guest is back.
Yeah, we got so many questions. Without name dropping, I've already mentioned this person before, so I don't feel like I want to give them any more airtime. An online influence who has recently got themselves in a serious medical, I'm trying to think of the way to word this.
Conundrum.
Yes, great minds. With the way that they handle their venomous snakes. How do you feel about people like that use their animals, who don't take care of their animals? And this is documented, this is proven that they don't take care of their animals, ending up with 14 of their snakes euthanized. Nobody could take them because they're venomous, and making videos with venomous snakes, handling them without warning people of there's always a danger with any animal. How does that sort of behavior make you feel?
Well, it's unfortunate because, again, like I said, just with my other example in media, the average person can't tell the difference between these types of crazies that do insane stuff. And I'm not going to sit here and say, I've never free handled a venomous snake, because that's not true. Because there are instances where I will go out and to again, prove that point of how these snakes are really not out to get you, that look at this. You mean
you're doing it in a different way to this person,
in a different context. And this person, maybe as pure as their intentions were trying to be, they were ill-informed, they were ill-experienced, and these are things that were just downright stupid. And it led to not just themselves being gravely harmed and almost killed, but to their animals being seized and euthanized. Of course, I don't condone this type of behavior at all. But the problem is that, again, we have this sort of blanket category that we apply to these types of people, because somebody doesn't see, this one guy who keeps venomous snakes in the States did this thing and got hurt. They see venomous snake keepers, venomous snake handlers, people who free handle venomous snakes, people who handle venomous snakes at all. And all of a sudden, everybody from every possible walk of life who's in this kind of field, it gets thrown under this umbrella. And so, of course, a lot of people are outraged who privately keep, venomous snakes in the States, because a lot of people have this idea or notion that when people are bitten by venomous snakes, that increases, regulations or restrictions on people's legal ability from state to state to keep these venomous animals, which really hasn't been documented at all. It's almost always escapes that, of course, restrict people's ability to keep venomous snakes, because really people don't generally
they've not done the right
by what you decide to do, but they do care if you are a public safety hazard. And that's, where you get a lot more legislation. So a lot of people kind of get upset by people who handle their venomous snakes regularly or free handle their venomous snakes. There are people angry with this individual for those types of reasons. There are people who are just downright, kind of rooting for their downfall because they were already just kind of had it coming and they had already received bites in the past before. It's just somebody who, again, the message itself of what this person's trying to do comes from somewhat of a positive place of saying, oh, they're not out to get you, they're blah blah blah. But by doing it in the incorrect way, by saying they're completely harmless if you do this exact thing, I can hack around this wild animal. I can do this perfect thing and hold it.
Which you can't say that for sure.
Of course, you can't say that for
any
sure.
animal.
Anytime I'm handling anything,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Or otherwise, there is of course a risk there. Now, I could take a calculated risk because I've been working with these animals for decades, but that risk is still real and there, and I'm going to communicate that to you. And I'm also not going to do any of that type of thing if I think there's even a hint of legitimate danger, or if this animal is kind of acting strange or not going to be super, receptive, because I can
you look at their body language, you assess the entire situation beforehand.
Over pushing it further to really show I'm holding it in my bare hands, see, it doesn't even want to hurt me, because I'm actively not trying to be hurt. Number one, from a purely selfish standpoint, I don't want to be in danger of losing my life or finger or arm or whatever. And people can look at what I do and say, well, of course you are, because look at what you're doing. But really and truly, if I thought there was a legitimate risk of actually being bitten, I'm not going to pick something up and go, well, hopefully it doesn't hurt me. I'm going to say, I'm like 99% sure that this animal is going to be completely receptive. And there are even animals that start off really energetic and calm down to the point where it's possible that they could be handled that way. But because they started off so unpredictable, then we're not going to chance it. And it's because I got that experience. I had that background. It's not just me playing around with personal baby animals and just seeing what I can get away with. Because at the end of the day, most animals don't want to waste their venom. Most animals don't want to bite. Most animals are happy to just be left alone. And so you can get away with a lot more than
most people don't think about.
Like people, the amount of times I've had people, ridicule or critique my handling of certain species and things like that. I'm going, this whole time, you're telling people they shouldn't be worried about venomous snakes, and then you're going to act like I've got a loaded gun to my head every single time I work with them. Because this is the same conversation. You can't tell people these aren't out to get you. They absolutely don't want anything. They don't want to waste that precious venom. They don't want to do all this, and then turn around and say, oh my gosh, how could you possibly handle that animal without being bitten? You're definitely going to get bitten. It's just a matter of time. You just got lucky. And I'm going, you realize, maybe 8 out of 10 wild snakes, non-venomous snakes that you catch are just not going to bite you. And people don't seem to apply that same sort of rhetoric or logic. If an animal doesn't feel threatened, venomous or otherwise, it's not likely to defend itself at all. And so that's part of my big sort of emphasis on the channel is I'm not trying to be, I'm not a daredevil. It's not an adrenaline rush for me to versus,
doing it for likes or for
holding its tail or free handling it, however, I'm handling these animals to the best of my ability to the better part of their comfort. If an animal is going to be better supported in my hands and it's going to allow me to do that, I'm going to do that because it's going to stay calmer. It's going to be a calmer snake, not feel as threatened, not feel as in danger, not feel like it's just having to put all of its weight on a tiny, thin piece of cold metal, but it's supported, it's able to move freely. And of course, it's nothing to take, lightly, but, for people to just kind of put a blanket stamp on stuff because of people like this individual who were bitten and say, this is something that should not be practiced by anyone. There's no instance where this is okay. There's some things, I've filmed king cobras well over 10 feet in length. What kind of snake hook are you going to be able to use to safely work with that animal? If you can't manage a snake and read body language and be able to maneuver an animal with your hands, you're putting yourself in danger in that sort of situation. So I'm not saying that everybody has to go out and handle certain species a certain way, or I'm not advocating that anybody does any type of thing that I would do, but I'm saying that it's part of that mission of showing people, listen, what if kids go out and try it, or what if blah blah blah? I say, if a kid flies all the way to Thailand, goes out hiking in the jungle, finds a king cobra and starts handling it, that's on his parents to tell him that he's.
I was going to say that's a parental responsibility.
Well, and it's ridiculous too because as a kid, I obviously ingested quite a lot of venomous snake handling from Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin and all this stuff. And of course I do that now because I always say, I didn't think as a kid to go out and do that. Of course, that's what I do for a job now, but that takes years of experience. And you're looking at the TV and you're recognizing that what you're seeing is an expert and what you're seeing is somebody who knows what they're doing. And they're emphasizing that danger while not playing
very big difference.
Monster effect of, oh, see how much it wants to attack me? See how much it wants to flee. See how aggressive it is. See how defensive it is because it feels like I'm a big predator. And once it realizes I'm not trying to eat it, now it's just trying to get away. Or now it's calm.
What would you do if a giant picked you up? A giant came and picked you up. We would be like, yeah, sure, this is fine. Or would you be like, exactly. Can you not? God, I love the delay.
I know.
Are you going or am I going?
You go.
Again, something that I mentioned previously on the podcast was Damien Duffy. I saw one earlier that he posted. He said, yeah, I'm 5 meters from the edge of the water here. The bank does go down, but I'm still keeping an eye out I'm looking behind me.
Just keep away from the water's edge. Well, I'm about 5 meters back now, and the bank just after that dips down a little bit, and you can trust me when I tell you, I'm looking behind me.
He says in his posts, with anything venomous, I make sure I have cell signal. I make sure I have anti-venom. There's someone with me. I can get to a hospital. I can get emergency care when I need to. I'm doing this so you don't have to, but still stay wise.
Get croc-wise and stay croc-wise in cock country, legends. You!
Any animal can potentially hurt you. That's the thing. It depends on the person as well. If I'm stung by a bee or a wasp, it doesn't do anything to me because I'm not allergic. My sister is horribly allergic to bees. Her hand will blow up, or, some people it would even be fatal for if they're allergic. I mean, peanuts aren't even an animal, but they can kill people.
Yeah.
But people don't look at peanuts and go, ah.
Yeah. Right.
It's kind of a bad example.
If we're really looking at
bees and wasps.
Well, like food-related, anaphylaxis, far outweighs any type of wild animal danger on any given day. So it's just like, again, it's just everybody wants to put in their 2 cents and wants to put in their piece about how they think people should, go about educating other people about wildlife, go about educating people about whatever. To the best of my ability, I teach to the best of my ability how I know how and how I think
do a good job, in my opinion.
Would be best accepted to a general audience that maybe their only interaction with some of these animals is negative ones or ones in media that are negative. That isn't even a real animal. It's a CGI, monster movie monster.
I was gonna say, yeah.
That people are
going back to that
legitimately afraid of. And
CGI bearded dragons and holes.
Right.
Said it before. It's scaring. It's scaremongering. It's making something that a bearded dragon, I suppose some people would find a bearded dragon intimidating or scary. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. But taking that and making it, as I said to you when we were just chatting, how many times do you see a snake in media or film, etc., that is actually what a snake's actually like? It's always the bad person. It's always the thing that's going to hurt you, or the baddie's apartment has a giant tegu lizard in it, or a big snake. No real, it's just the fear that is associated with the animals, which is really sad because as I say, they deserve more. We should talk about insects as well, because insects are cool, misunderstood. They are awesome.
Yeah, I love insects. I love them. That's actually, again, that was that main sort of catalyst for me even starting my channel, is what I was seeing was fear mongering about stinging insects. And I grew up, of course, catching bugs outside, all that type of stuff. But
I was that person. I was that kid.
In high school, I got really into social insects, primarily ants and primarily wasps.
Ants are fascinating.
Oh, they're so cool. They're so fascinating. And
they really are.
Get enough of them. And I got really into, going out certain times a year. You can get what's called the nuptial flights. So the reproductive ants, the prince and princess ants, we'll call them, will fly out after heavy rain at certain times a year in certain places. and they'll mate, and then the males will die because they've served their purpose in the fairly girl boss world of being a social insect. And
That's why I love him.
princess, yes, she's now a queen. She'll tear her wings off, she'll burrow underground, and she'll start her colony. And so I was obsessed with, trying to track weather, and I would go out to certain places to look for certain species of ants during their nuptial flights. And I was just keeping all sorts of ants. And I'd even started testing the sting of some of the species on my own. I went with some friends down to South Texas, and I caught it's called a hairy panther ant, Neoponera villosa. It's about as close as we get to a bullet ant in Texas. And I tried the sting of it just because I was curious, just because I wanted to see what it felt like. And then later that year, I actually went to Costa Rica with a bunch of other reptile and insect friends, just as a first little trip. I was 17 at the time. And I tried a few little ant stings down there just because I was curious. This was before the big buzz of Coyote Peterson and all this mainstream sort of bite and sting stuff was really going on. But I was just fascinated. I was just like, I wonder how this one compares to this one and this one and here. And, once I started seeing what, the Brave Wilderness team was starting to put out about these animals that were like some of my favorites. I mean, I couldn't get over finding bullet ants and trap giants in the wild. I mean, it was just like some of my favorite species. And all of a sudden I'm seeing, just horrific PR, negative PR about these insects. And I'm going, a tarantula hawk wasp is probably the least likely thing to ever sting anyone ever, unless you get
That's the ironic thing. That's
the shorts or something.
Irony.
Like, these are solitary wasps. They're not even people usually get stung by yellow jackets or paper wasps because they have a nest that they're defensive of. And if you get too close or you disturb that, then they'll come out and try and deter you from that area, try and get you out.
If a stranger comes into your home,
exactly,
are you going to protect your family?
An alien invasion, of course you're going to respond. And so I was just seeing all this crazy stuff about insects being these horrible, scary, painfully stinging, terrible stuff.
It's so far from the truth.
And it generally is super far from the truth. And at the same time, it's a big part of what plays into that negative connotation, that bad rap that insects have. Most people don't like insects. I mean, the amount of times I've seen people jump out of a chair at outdoor seating at a restaurant because a fly will just shoot by their ear and they think it's a wasp or something. Or a butterfly will try and land on their arm to drink some sweat and they'll freak out. Why? It's because so many people associate insects with pain, with stings. They got stung by a yellow jacket as a kid and they've never ever looked at or heard a buzzing sound without flinching or screaming or jumping. It's because, yes, I get that pain can be a negative aspect. I get that nobody wants to be in pain, but I feel like what we really need to start approaching with insects is that same kind of vibe that a lot of people approach honeybees with. I think honeybees are pretty, widely accepted, and people like, usually else, maybe that person that goes to swat something, maybe somebody goes, oh, don't, it's a honeybee. Don't worry. It's not going to sting you if you stay still. Nothing's going to sting you if you stay still. I think what we need to do is
I say that every single time.
We almost need a B movie for everything else.
Love the B movie.
You like jazz?
Have you seen, I can't remember which jackass it is. It's Steve-O and the other person is completely freaking out and being stung. And Steve-O just stands there because he's calm. Guess what happens? He's not stung. And he goes, see, why is he freaking out? He's going to get stung if he freaks out. Idiot.
Dave doesn't understand is that the more you freak out, the more you get stung. Ice water. Idiot.
I think that if a lot of people knew more about them, how clever they are, how interesting they are, they would have a lot more respect for them. I don't know a lot about them, but what I do know about them, especially ants, is absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm always down for learning more about them and other insects because underrated.
Yeah.
I'm sure, because I think people feel more personal towards them as well. If they thought, wow, that's interesting, that's clever, how do they do that? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
That they would look at them from a different perspective. They're just animals just trying to
survive.
animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. I mean, really and truly, almost every single one of these problems in regards to wildlife is a curable thing with education. People just need to know enough about them. And that's why I went in and kind of did a whole kind of almost rebuttal series of these bites and stings with a lot of the same things as Brave Wilderness, just because I was like, number one, this is not mind altering pain. Like, you realize that there's like a threshold, and then you go into shock or you pass out. Like, you're not getting stung.
It's your reaction to it as well. Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, this is completely different than if something stung me in my shirt and I had no idea what was going on. I'd jump 10 feet in the air. I'd yell some expletives.
Yeah, it's just the surprise, though.
You can't convince me that if you said, listen, your whole family is going to be crushed under 2 tons of concrete if you scream or cry when I have this bee sting you or this bullet ant, like one individual insect sting, not the end of the world. And so many people try and say, oh, he's got some kind of superhuman pain threshold. If you literally said, I'm going to burn your house down if you scream when I sting you with this wasp, you will not scream. You can actually physically keep yourself from doing that. And I get it. If it hurts, I know that it hurts. I've been stung by bullet ants and tarantula hawk wasps and velvet ants. I've been stung by so much stuff, but very, very few, almost nothing has ever made me involuntarily do anything. I let out a bit of a screamy laugh when I took a sting from a gigantic hornet in Thailand. And that was just about it. Anything else is just kind of like, oh man, that really actually hurts.
People underestimate the power of your brain and your mindset
100%.
because it's similar.
And if you know that pain is coming, you could psychologically brace yourself for it. Because I get so many people, I get critical of people like Coyote Peterson kind of drumming stuff up, making things seem a lot worse and scaring people about it. It's really not necessary to be acting like that. Well, everybody reacts to pain differently, blah blah blah. I'm like, he said he has a high pain tolerance in his videos, and then he still does this. So what's the truth here? Because in my opinion, I could have been rolling around and screaming and crying and getting millions of views on my stuff, but I chose to be authentic and true and real so that people aren't still getting this monster movie level stuff from an insect. I mean, people are, oh, it feels like getting shot with a bullet, or it feels like blah, blah, blah. I'm like, folks, if it was any more painful, I'd probably just go into shock. You can get shot with a gun and you go into shock. But you don't even feel, your brain protects you from even feeling the pain. Exactly. So there's no way
that people that have lost limbs in accidents and they've just, the adrenaline has just got them through it and they've actually not realized that they've lost a limb or,
what are we really talking about here? So it's just like stuff like that where it's like trying to reframe these misconceptions for people because all the media that they consume thus far has these being monster movie level.
If you tell yourself it's going to hurt. A personal example that I can say, that's why I agree with you so strongly as well, is that when I get tattooed, I have my palms, I have the ends of the fingers, and I have an incredible pain threshold. I barely feel pain. I got a burn all the way down my leg with sugar water, boiling sugar water, and I didn't freak out because freaking out makes it so much worse.
Right.
When you get tattooed, I've seen 9 out of 10 times people will tense up, people will forget how to breathe, they won't breathe, and it's gonna hurt a lot more. It's coming. You've booked this tattoo. You're not getting tattoos. You're getting tattooed from out of your free will. You're choosing this.
Yeah.
If I will not sit here and lie to you and say that this did not hurt.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything else, even back of the knee that some people say, oh, that's one of the worst spots. I think the only thing was probably my fingers and my palms.
Yeah.
That was bad. But it's the mindset. I've had practice. I can say that I've had enough practice with tattoos,
right?
To know I put myself in the mindset.
Yeah.
Don't think about how much it's hurting.
Yeah.
Relax yourself, breathe, and I can guarantee you, as I know firsthand, that it's going to hurt a hell of a lot less than if you go into that tattoo thinking, oh, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna
Yeah.
hurt. My neck was more uncomfortable than anything because it goes, that was the wrong side, because it goes all the way up. That was just uncomfortable because I had to have my head up to the side. If you stretch it, because it's stretched out, if you stretch it out, that's uncomfortable for 3 hours and then doing the other side. I mean, tattoo stings.
Yeah, it's really
semi-related.
similar. I've got a handful of tattoos. I can tell you honestly, I mean, almost the same sensation. The only difference is that after, a sting usually lasts much less amount of time for that stinging feeling. So like, up, higher up, where it's really, it's kind of uncomfortable up there.
Yeah, it depends where on the body. Yeah.
Kind of peak pain, for even a big hornet, like you're looking at maybe 5-10 minutes of that pain. And then you're just dealing with some soreness, some inflammation, itchiness in the days following. Like, so many people are like, oh my gosh, no, you don't understand. I'm like, I'm the one who just took the sting in front of you. Like, you don't understand. Like this stuff.
You'll go out and get a tattoo.
You'll go out and
They'll go out and get a tattoo.
Like, yeah, it kind of hurts, but like, it's mind over matter. I'm like, and then if Coyote Peterson was in the tattoo chair, writhing and screaming and foaming at the mouth, people would be like, what a freaking goofball. And I'm sitting here telling people the same thing, and everybody's going, well, you just don't understand, man. You just don't really get it. And I'm like, I'm actually one of the few people that doesn't get it, actually. So I think a lot of again, ties back into media, ties back into why insects have such a bad rap. It's because they don't have a lot of good PR. Like Bee Movie, good PR for bees. So people actually care about bees. They're like, oh, in fact, much so that it negatively affects our bees because people assume that we're talking about European honeybees. We say, save the bees, because they have no idea.
Mine's a drone.
Because they've never been introduced to any of our native bees. So they're sitting here going, oh, bees are pollinators, yada, yada, yada. I say, a European honeybee.
The amount of people that think that this is a fly. It's not a fly.
But even flies are great. And there's no positive PR on flies.
Yeah, but people don't realize that the world would not exist if it wasn't for bees and for insects. We would not be able to exist.
We could realistically bounce back from an entire collapse of megafauna. If we sadly lost most of our terrestrial large animals, like we could maybe push through and bounce back from that. I mean, we're already seeing that happen in a lot of different parts of the world. But without insects, I mean, we're done for. We're done for.
Exactly.
I mean, we'd be in feet of feces and rotting animal carcasses, and it would just be a hellscape without insects and arachnids. It would just be unlivable. The same way it would be unlivable without fungi or bacteria or any of these other, essential building blocks of life on our planet. Because we love to say, oh, save the panda bears or save the whales or save the yada, yada, yada. What we need to be doing is preserving entire ecosystems, because we need every single level of, every single piece of the puzzle to be in place for us to have a healthy planet. Because it's awesome that we've got whales helping, circulate and fertilize the ocean, so we have more phytoplankton to produce more oxygen, to help absorb more carbon dioxide. I mean, that's awesome that we've got these animals that partake in regulating their ecosystems, their environments, and whatever. But insects, bacteria, fungi, I mean, these are the unsung heroes that if we didn't have them,
we wouldn't exist. The world wouldn't. The world wouldn't exist.
Yeah, it's like a Bee Movie, esque, trope of you act like, as much as we love the Bee Movie and it's funny and it's good. It illustrates the point of what do our lives look like without pollinators, and you see how drastically we're impacted. What does it look like without detritivores? What does it look like without scavenging insects? What does it look like without, dung beetles? There are some major big, ecological services that insects perform. They do billions, trillions of dollars worth of ecological services every single year, just innately.
And we don't even appreciate them.
We don't appreciate them at all. We like bees.
Not everyone appreciates
honeybees, and then most people don't even know about any of the other kinds. It's just like, so I think insects get a bad rap because nobody's really fighting for them.
And that's part of
they're not aware of
one
what
of the
they
main
do and how amazing they are.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the main sort of missions on my channel is just to get them in front of people, show them how interesting they are, show them close up, really, really get people to appreciate or at least approach insects from a different angle, because otherwise, yeah, of course, you're going to be grossed out and you're going to be afraid of them. You're going to be swatting at them. You're going to be doing whatever. But at the end of the day, insects are priceless. They're so viable and important to this planet that without them, again, we just wouldn't survive. We just wouldn't survive. Not life as we know it at all. I mean,
yeah,
would just be pretty slim.
Yeah, non-existent. Sure. That is a good way to say what is one insect that everyone should appreciate more and what makes it so special.
Man, that's a good one. I mean, honestly,
you can say more than one if it's hard to say one.
It could be answered in a billion ways.
That's what the second podcast is for. The second podcast episode.
Just insects. Insects rendezvous.
Insects rendezvous, yeah.
I gotta say, for me personally, I am partial to the complete metamorphosis crowd. So that is moths and butterflies, that is ants, bees, and wasps, that is flies, that is beetles. So these 4 orders, so that's Lepidoptera, which is moths and butterflies, Hymenoptera, ants, bees, and wasps, sawflies, and some of the other little ones, Diptera, flies, and Coleoptera, beetles, are some of the most important groups on Earth. And really, it's because of all of the different stuff that they do. Because, of course, we know that bees are pollinators, but wasps are amazing predators. They help regulate caterpillar populations. Some of them, of course, are parasitic, so they'll prey on tarantulas, wolf spiders, cockroaches. Wasps are such important predators, and we often neglect, the purpose of wasps so often. Without wasps, I mean, we could have serious ecological decline in our vegetation. I mean, caterpillars, small, vegetarian insects that are pretty benign that you wouldn't worry about. Oh, it's a cute little inchworm, whatever. They're going to explode. They're going to explode and then eat up all the trees, and we're going to have, famine and droughts, and it's going to be horrible without our wasps. Ants, of course, so incredibly important, so diverse, so numerous. I mean, they provide so many services, cleanup, they provide food for all sorts of other animals, they add nutrients back into the soil, they aerate the soil, so important. Flies, oh my gosh, just flies alone help manage so much, carrion, dead animal waste, fecal waste, all sorts of stuff. Beetles as well, great at cleaning up carrion, dead. I mean, it's just like those 4 groups alone. You've got your, a lot of your pollinators, you've got a lot of your, carrion feeders, you've got a lot of your, just straight up biomass volume of insects that other animals depend on to survive. Bats, birds, frogs, lizards, all these animals really depend on these groups to survive. I would say those 4. And then, if I had to add a 5th order, it would be Blattidae, which is the cockroaches. Roaches, so
another
versatile,
one that is
so important.
That is completely
so underrated, and nobody appreciates them at all. Everybody goes, oh, they're dirty, they're gross. They're only dirty and gross because they're cleaning up after us. Oh, they're in my apartment. Did you leave a bunch of takeout out on the counter that got too gross and old, full of botulin?
That's another thing that's just like that people just don't seem to connect the dots on. It's like you left this trash out, which, they eat trash and
they're actually
nasty things for us. So
it's cleaner because those roaches move in. They're helping you.
Again, the ironic thing.
It's just like, man, and also Blattidae also includes termites. Termites are a type of social roach in a sense, and they're so important at breaking down fallen logs, just like beetle larvae and other insects. I mean, it's just like, man, I mean, they do so much stuff that it's just like, it's hard to really encapsulate it all. And it's actually, I have every once in a while,
so many layers, and
there's so many layers. I have a full PowerPoint presentation of why we need insects, that if I'm ever asked to do a guest speaking spot anywhere, it's my go-to thing that I do.
You can do that on here. I'm happy for you to do that in a different episode.
Right? It is
I want to watch it.
one of my biggest things to tell people, because at first I'll just go through and I'll say, what's everybody's favorite animal? Oh, I like giraffes, or actually I just
Fluffy.
dogs, or I like, oh, maybe somebody will say something other than a mammal or a
True
bird.
eyes.
Oh, I like iguanas, I guess, and I'm saying not a single person in here has said an insect, and yet they make up, not just biomass wise, but percentage wise, the majority of the animal kingdom. Just them and spiders take up this huge chunk of the pie.
No, I
And
mean it. We should record
a lot
that.
of invertebrates.
Sure.
And it's like, oh my gosh, we're looking at, 1, 2, 3% of our wild mammals and birds and all these little slivers. So when you tell somebody, think of 5 animals. I mean, I could even be guilty of this. Think of 5 animals. What's the first thing that come to your mind? It's usually not
Dog,
insects.
cat.
I mean, the amount of times I've had to argue with people in my own videos, like, don't listen to this guy. He's calling wasps animals. What the hell does he know? And I'm like, wasps are animals. The amount of people that think insects aren't animals, arachnids. I'm like, you realize a starfish is an animal, an anemone is an animal, coral's an animal, like
sea
worms
sponge
are animals, sponges are animals. People they just forget all of biology that they ever.
Sponges are animals because of SpongeBob.
And I'm like, can we think critically here?
Because we have that personal relation.
That's right.
So it's like, oh, it's different if it's a sponge, because we have that
we have that connection there through media.
We relate it to, oh, SpongeBob, that's funny. We enjoy SpongeBob. That makes us laugh. That's a positive thing that we have. A jellyfish are just a blob of jelly. They don't even have a brain or bones.
But it's like, that's not how we classify an animal, We classify animals on a cellular level.
It has to have bones and But jellyfish aren't even, they're more of a mass, but they're considered an animal.
Yeah.
They're just a
blob. Yeah. So just like, a worm, or, they've got organs and tissues and different cell functions, stinging cells, nematocysts, all sorts of stuff. Like, it kind of falls apart when you talk to somebody who really has no idea what they're talking about, because you go, okay, well,
it's a lot to absorb.
Isn't an animal, what is it? And they go, well, I don't know, it's a jellyfish. I don't know what to tell you. We forget that kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and we forget that we really have very few options up here on the kingdom level. You're either a bacterium, you're a plant, you're fungi, you're an animal. You don't have a whole lot of options there. So if it's not a bacterium, you're not a fungi, you're not a plant, chances are probably an animal.
You're an animal. Yeah.
People they don't think of it that way. They forget going through basic, primary school lessons and stuff like that. And you end up with people that want to argue that, a lizard isn't an animal, it's a reptile, or, a fish isn't an animal, it's a fish. And you're going, you really are, you don't know what you're really talking about at that point. And you can talk to your red in the face to some of these people, and that just doesn't make any sense to me.
How do you think that we can help people overcome the fear of spiders? Because I've seen exposure therapy. It's not for everyone, of course, but exposure therapy, I don't know what the success rate is, but I know it's pretty high. Every single time I know of it, just with animals in general, with lizards, with snakes, especially snakes, that is, with me, any non-venomous snake has had a 100% success rate once they feel comfortable enough to hold it. And that's another thing as well, that people assume that I'm going to get this snake out and stress it out while you're flailing around and freaking out. I care about my animals.
Yeah.
I want you to understand that it's not going to hurt you, but I'm not going to put my animals in a position of, or if you're scared of a frog, I'm not going to throw a frog at you. I care about them. They're my animals. They're my babies. I'm not going to stress them out because you're getting stressed out. Fast forward, when they eventually end up holding it, they enjoy it.
Yeah.
They say, oh, it's quite nice. It's not slimy. I quite like the feel of the scales. Oh, it feels, the way it's moving feels, and it's the same with most things, really. It's, I mean, cockroaches tickle a little bit, or some spiders can tickle a bit. With cane toads, when people make videos of them excreting the bufotoxins, they don't understand that this this cane toad is fearing for its life. You have to really, 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 really stress it out for it to do that. It's not worth it. Nobody learns from them, but it's the same with the Texas horn lizards.
Mhm.
They don't actually like squirt blood from their eyes very often,
Right.
because it's a last ditch attempt of, I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, sure. And half the
But-
time you can't even get them to do that without like an actual dog or coyote puppet.
Something to stress them out.
For a person, like even poking or prodding them with your hand is usually
Yeah,
not enough.
they think that their life is in
Like,
danger
I'm
and
actually
about to
gonna
end.
eat them or something. Yeah. Well, and back to our question at hand, arachnophobia.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
I kind of split it a little bit into two separate groups. I almost look at a fear of spiders as almost a different beast entirely to arachnophobia, and I'll explain what I mean.
Yep.
There are legitimate phobias that people have that can be lifelong and pretty much incurable. You might be able to go about your day, a little bit easier moving through processing a phobia, but sometimes that's just a visceral reaction that just happens to you through some kind of iconography, through just seeing a certain animal or being in a certain situation. Sometimes exposure therapy or looking at the animals or whatever, sometimes it just won't work. People are fearful of a snake or a spider because they think,
but it's not
that misconception, they think it could hurt them or they think it's going to hurt them. And so with these people who have a fear of spiders, not necessarily arachnophobes, because we can, that's case by case basis. Maybe somebody could benefit from watching my videos through a screen. You don't even have to be in the room with the spider. Just seeing pictures or videos of it, close up might be too much for you anyway. You got the wrong idea about this thing. Let me show you. You don't have to touch it. You don't even have to be in the room with it. Watch it on the screen. I mean, so many people have gotten back to me in comments of videos or personally and told me how much I've helped them overcome a fear of spiders or a fear of snakes, because
wonderful.
They have a fear of these animals because of a lack of knowledge, a lack of experience around them, and misconceptions that they've been,
or it's ingrained into them.
They've been drilled into them, throughout their lives. And so really at the end of the day, education is that antidote. It's that vaccine against that ignorant fear that sometimes, we just automatically have. I mean, sometimes, there could be things that happen when we're younger kids, maybe you have a negative experience,
that's usually where phobias come from anyway,
or something like that. But sometimes, I mean, there are some people that maybe they never had anything like that, but I mean, we are animals and we have evolved here on this planet, and things like snakes for many of our ancestors across the planet have been legitimate dangerous animals that we've had to look out for. And so there are some innate things that can play into these sort of phobias. And so there can be 1,000 variables of why somebody might be intimidated or afraid of or fearful of.
Every case is different and every person is different.
At the end of the day, if it's not a true debilitating, paralyzing phobia, it's education, it's exposure therapy, and that's really the cure. And now, if your exposure therapy is just watching a video or looking at one picture a week or whatever you got to do, and you couple that with just learning more about these animals, when you see a spider, you're not automatically going, "Oh my gosh, you could have bitten me while I was asleep," or "It could have yada yada yada." You're just going, "There's a spider that got stuck in my house. Let me just scoop it up, throw it outside." You're reframing all of these interactions. I mean, I get around this time of year, especially too, all those videos of people catching a big old wolf spider, and she's got all of her babies on her back, and they don't realize it. And then all of a sudden, all the babies flee because everything's under attack. Babies disperse to try and get out of harm's way. And then all of a sudden, you're sitting there from across the room trying to scoop out a wolf spider when you could have just carefully scooped it up with Tupperware, because it's not going to bite you. But now
they're running for their lives. They think they're in danger.
Baby wolf spiders into your kitchen, and they're scattering everywhere. They're getting in shoes. They're getting everywhere else. And what does that do? That reinforces all that horrific monster movie type misconception that you have about spiders, because you were already afraid enough to deal with a big old wolf spider in your house, because it would be an adult female if she's covered in babies. But now you've got hundreds of spiders all over the place. And so it's just, again, you could have easily avoided that by going about that type of thing in a different way. And so again, it's just education. Because if you were looking at it, if you knew that you're not in danger walking all the way up and looking really closely at this wolf spider, to does she have babies all over her back? She looks a little lumpy from back here. Oh, she does. Okay, I don't want to smack it with a broom or disturb it too much, because then all those babies might disperse inside of my house. So I'm going to carefully capture it with a Tupperware and a piece of paper and toss it outside. It's just like most people, it elevates that whole experience into this horrible. I mean, I understand how somebody who's already fearful of spiders, that's their worst nightmare, to try and get a spider out of your house. It might be the biggest spider you've ever seen, and all of a sudden,
my neighbors have people like me.
Swarming in, so it's just like it's one of those things where, really and truly, again, it's that education that really is the cure all. And that's, again, I say, for people who are fearful of or have a fear of spiders, not necessarily arachnophobes, because I get that there's a bit of a different distinction there. Lots of people say, oh yeah, my biggest fear is probably spiders. They might not actually be
but they'll be in a room with one.
Phobia. But they might jump up on the dinner table because they see a spider, not because necessarily of a visceral phobia, but because they just assume that it's going to bite them and hurt them. And so, of course, they have a natural fear response to potential pain or danger. Children learn from their parents. And their peers.
If they see their parents freaking out, they're going to freak out.
Parents are freaking out. The child's going, oh my gosh, this is enough to rattle, the most powerful people I know. I am going to learn.
They're here to protect me. If they fear this, then it must mean
it must be really bad. And then you get this cycle of, go ahead.
Sorry. Love the delay. Something I like to say to kids quite often if they're scared of a spider, I'll say, okay, so how many times have you seen cobwebs? Everyone sees cobwebs. That's just something that happens. And they'll be like, yeah, loads of times. I was like, do you have them in your bedroom? Do you have the cobwebs in your bedroom? Okay, so if there's cobwebs in your bedroom, then who makes the cobwebs? The spiders do. And how many times have you been attacked by a spider? Because the spider's been in your room because it's made the cobwebs. So how many times has it attacked you? And they'll be like, none. It's showing them that that's proof.
Yeah.
You can't go into it more than that, than proof that there has been a spider in your room with you for long enough to make a web or cobwebs, or and it's never hurt you, because then they'll grow up and they'll teach their kids that it's all about passing it down. And I don't blame anyone. I said this in the podcast with Greg. I don't blame anyone that has, so my mum's fear, I told you my mum's scared of spiders. Her fear of spiders comes from so my grandparents lived in Australia, and she was born in Australia, and she lived there when she was first born. And there was an incident in the stroller. Like, it wasn't lace, but it was some kind of material over the stroller, the buggy.
Mesh or something.
That she was in. And a tarantula was crawling up it, and obviously it weighed more. So, and the spider ended up on my mum's face like this. And because she's been told this story growing up and how scary it was, and my grandparents saying, telling the story to different people, and she's always heard, oh, the spider, you remember when that happened to her, and how scary it was, and how it was covering her face. And I don't blame her for being scared of spiders. If you've grown up with that,
right? Yeah,
that's what you associate with spiders, and that's your and also if you're if previous generations before you genuinely believe, it's the same with crocodiles and things like that. It's if they genuinely believe, they don't know any different, then of course they're going to say, watch out for the crocodile, watch out for this, watch out for that, that's going to hurt you. Because but that's where people like us come in. And something I often say is, if we can help just save one animal, it's better than one animal not being saved.
Right.
So I'm happy with that. I mean, obviously I would like hundreds and thousands of whatever, but it must be so good when people comment things like you were saying, like, I'm not scared of it. That's such a good, because like, imagine how many animals you saved from just being, because almost everyone's go-to reaction is get the shoe, get the broom, squash
just what
it.
you do. Yeah. And again, it's just part of that
shark infested waters.
Right,
get
exactly.
The shoe to kill the spider.
Spider in here, you just you squash it, in a napkin, you throw it away, do whatever you're gonna do. Again, it's just like it's negative reinforcement, and that's why it takes that element of education. That's what's needed to sort of peel back all these layers to show people, the true nature of these creatures and the true, nature of their surroundings, and that you don't have to be, you're allowed to understand that there's danger involved, and you're allowed to know that there are certain species that are, more dangerous than others, and certain species you need to be smarter around. But it's like you can do that with education and not with fear. You can say, listen, like Wild Man, when he goes out and he says, listen, I'm this far away from the water here.
Yeah, exactly.
I know what the danger is, but I'm not afraid here. I'm cautious. I'm aware of what could happen, and I'm going to be smart about what I'm doing. But I'm not going to be sitting here teeth chattering, screaming, telling everybody around, hey, watch out. At any moment you can get attacked.
The thing is, if you panic when you're in danger, that's the worst thing to do, because you won't think rationally,
and you
might freeze, and exactly.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where, I do my best to,
and you do a good job. Yeah.
Provide that kind of catalyst to show people that's really not what these animals are trying to do. That's really not how they are. And here's proof.
So talking about animals' behaviors and how we see animals, I have a question that you have volunteered to read out, because you are such a good friend and you just want to help me out. It's almost midnight here. I'm getting tired, and it's definitely not because I can't say a certain word, because I'm a silly, but then I could say arachnophobia without any problem.
Well, no issue at all. Yes. So the question for you folks at home, because you can't obviously,
I really couldn't say it.
Can you talk about the impact of anthropomorphism on how we view animal behavior? Does it help or harm our understanding? So this is an incredibly nuanced question, because really I could sit here all day and answer from either side of the fence. Now, there are plenty of instances where anthropomorphizing an animal can help us to alleviate some of the apprehension around stuff. Put out this video a few years ago about how smart are jumping spiders. And a lot of it was, fairly contemporary scientific interpretation of, just some studies and things like that levied against what a lot of people think. I'm really happy that a lot more people are kind of getting into keeping jumping spiders and find them to be really adorable. And because they're rounder and fluffier and have more inquisitive movements, it's a lot easier to anthropomorphize them than it is to anthropomorphize, maybe a more gangly, widow spider, or perhaps a large tarantula or something like that. And so what I was seeing was a lot of people start to say, oh, well, my jumping spider actually really enjoys doing this type of thing with me. Or my jumping spider can recognize me and will hide when somebody else comes in the room, but comes out looking for food when it's me. And a lot of this type of rhetoric is, in a sense, not necessarily backed up by any kind of scientific evidence. There are plenty of reasonable explanations as to why animals will exhibit certain types of behaviors. But I've kind of found something in the case of jumping spiders. I found something that kind of restructured the way I approach making those types of gotcha type myth busting videos about jumping spiders. It's really not a big deal if people want to imagine that their jumping spiders genuinely form a connection with them and recognize them and respond to their names, or whatever people think about those jumping spiders, because it's essentially gaslighting people into having positive PR in their brains about spiders. And when I made my video saying there's actually not a whole lot of evidence to suggest that these animals are forming social bonds, there's really not any sort of evolutionary explanation.
People got their torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, they say, hey, you don't know this, actually,
you don't know my dog.
Yeah, and it's like, and I was sitting there reading through all these comments, and that video still gains quite a lot of traction, ebbs and flows throughout the years since it's been uploaded. But for the most part, I found that it kind of turned people off to learning more about jumping spiders. They kind of dug their heels in. They didn't like that I was kind of saying, well, we're really not seeing, it's kind of like, well, if you can't prove that they can't, then they must be able to, right? And it's kind of, that's not really how it works. And so I kind of...
Do you know what? It's funny. It's funny because they'll take that because they believe they know better.
Right.
They'll take that as gospel.
Yeah.
But when you try and say, you are just trying to say what they're really like.
Yeah.
Yet they'll take the misconceptions as gospel, which is a very interesting. Don't you think that's just...
Yes, and it really is deep rooted in this kind of personal experience. And that's one of the biggest things that I have to combat with any of this type of stuff is personal experience and people misinterpreting animal behavior. Because I'll put out a video saying cottonmouths, which is a venomous snake in the US, they don't chase you.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, I've been chased multiple times by, probably most of the time, these folks are not even seeing a cottonmouth. They're seeing a water snake attracted to the
something that looks similar to the average person.
They think it's chasing their kayak. But the problem is because in their minds, their experience is, no, I was actually chased by a venomous snake. Of course, it's their personal experience against what some supposed expert is telling them. So they
don't go for the logical.
Exactly.
And Andrew was saying they don't know the difference between your boat or a canoe or whatever to a rock.
Yeah.
In the, they're not.
They're just moving through. There's things that
that's their path. They choose
it.
Might
be inquisitive. There might be a smell of you're maybe using live bait. You maybe just pulled a fish up onto your kayak. They might be hearing splashing, smelling fish. They might be coming in to see if there's food there. I mean, that's just a perfectly normal response as a snake. Or a lot of times on foot.
But if a dog did that or a cat did that,
exactly.
That's cute.
People wouldn't care. They'd be able to interpret and understand because
they know about them.
It's easier to understand because they are knowledgeable about the body language, about the behavior of those animals that they're familiar with, not so much the other stuff. So in some instances, the anthropomorphizing of animals is kind of like, ambient, fairly, inconsequential with some of this stuff. In other cases, it can be dangerous because it reinforces some of those misunderstandings and negative stereotypes. Somebody who's seeing a defensive behavior in an animal might, sort of, I'm trying to think of the exact word that I want, might try to, it's not going to come to me. Somebody might see a defensive behavior, like a cottonmouth, boom, opening its bright white mouth to ward off predators. And they might try to insinuate that this animal is actually being aggressive. It's trying to bite me.
What about snappers? when they have their mouth open?
Open their mouths open. It's a defensive posture because they feel threatened. But to somebody else who might be anthropomorphizing them, they might say, no, I'm projecting, which is the word I was looking for earlier. I'm projecting aggression into this animal because it looks intimidating, looks scary. It looks like it's trying to bite me. A rattlesnake. It's coiled up. It's in a strike position. I'm projecting anger and aggression into this animal, and that's a negative anthropomorphizing of an animal because then
you're just saying it to show off now.
You reinforce those negative stereotypes, right? Because then you're looking at an animal and you're not seeing the true behavior. You're seeing it through the lens of a false sort of projected reality. And that's where it gets really tricky as well. Because again, most of what I have to deal with is these sort of misremembered, misconception type memories that people have. Oh no, actually, people say
my mom be scared of spiders if she hadn't heard that story growing up.
Right.
Probably not.
And it's like if she had a VHS recording of that exact moment, would it be as scary as what was played back in the mind? And was it a few-inch leg span huntsman and not a gigantic
it probably was.
tarantula, and it was just like it fell out of a tree and just quickly scurried across a little,
I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't exist. So,
it's just like, you don't know. The problem is all these people say, oh, no. I've got this. I mean, all the time I get people arguing with me.
How it went.
And it's like, come on. Like, there's nothing I can say to argue with somebody's supposed personal experience. They think that's what happened. And they're willing to fight tooth and nail to prove me wrong. So many times, I'll post a video about brown recluse spiders. They have a horrible reputation in the U.S. A lot of people believe they cause these big, nasty sores and stuff. And I said, well, looking at the venom chemically, you're not really seeing that type of thing. I'm not going to just say that again, because I like to be tactile. I like to actually put my money where my mouth is. I've had not one, but two separate instances where I've had a brown recluse bite me and documented the full effects. Now, I know I'm a healthy individual, average adult person. And of course, effects could vary from person to person, of course. But
same with wasps
in
and
general,
bees,
in general, most people think, oh, this could be a death sentence. So this is for sure going to rot an arm, or you're for sure going to see this, this, and this. And even with an extreme bite, it still was manageable at home. It was still gone within, a month of it showing up. And there was necrosis, but it looked nothing like what people generally describe or attribute. But still, I'll have people say, well, this isn't true because I know, because this happened to me back when I was living in Southern Oregon. And I say, Southern Oregon, you are like 2,000 miles outside of the natural range of these spiders. But of course I'm wrong, because maybe they hitchhiked in. I'm like, the amount of maybe they hitchhiked in on furniture or plants that I've heard, I'm like, maybe there's something else at play here. Maybe bacteria, which is present all throughout the United States and can get into any kind of wound, any kind of infected follicle or scratch or abrasion or mosquito bite. Because half of these things, people say, oh, I just thought it was a bug bite at first, but then it turned into a brown recluse bite. And I'm like, so really you had a mosquito bite, it got infected, and then it became something you thought was a brown recluse bite, but is really, some kind of necrotizing bacterial infection. So the problem is that with these people, there's no winning, because they've decided that their personal experience true.
It's fair.
It's like, what do you expect them to do? But the problem is it's really hard to educate somebody past a misremembered or misinterpreted personal experience. And that's one of the biggest hurdles with some of the stuff that I put out. Yeah. And that's why I levy my personal experience against theirs. And that's, again, why I find that sort of tactile, hands-on approach so important. Because I could sit here and make this exact same points in a cottonmouth aggression video and say they're not aggressive, they won't chase you. But if I'm not there interacting with and working with multiple, wild cottonmouths, who's to say somebody's like, actually, I live in Alabama. I've lived here all my life. I've been fishing for the last 50 years. I've been chased by hundreds of cottonmouths. Because I didn't go and showcase and show, no, this is a wild snake. This is the behavior. You might have seen it do this. This is actually look, it's charging right for me. It went right between my legs to the big, boulder behind me to hide, because that's where it lives. It's not chasing me. And I know that because I stood still and it went right past me, because it's not an aggressive behavior. It's one, out of self-preservation. Yeah. And, if I was approaching it with that wrong sort of frame of mind without really understanding what was going on, of course I could misremember that. But, it's just like, kind of depends. So does it help or harm our understanding to anthropomorphize stuff? It's usually kind of a really gray area somewhere in the middle on some kind of spectrum, because at best, anthropomorphizing animals can help us to better foster a sort of pseudo relationship.
Not be so scared of them, and
right. Yeah, you can sort of, if you want to project positive feelings, love, affection onto a creature that's just comfortable with you, that recognizes that you're where food comes from, go for it. It's kind of one of those types of things. But if you're anthropomorphizing to the point where you are projecting negative sort of behaviors or feelings to onto animals or onto behaviors of animals, that's no good. You're not
their life is worth just as much as anyone else.
You're not somebody who has a realistic understanding of animal behavior, so you really have no business trying to interpret that behavior through a human lens, because that's not where the animal's coming from. It can be hard to pull ourselves out of ourselves to kind of understand how animals are feeling or what their day-to-day lives are like. But for the most part, you really have to just kind of take everything off and observe animal behavior kind of at face value. And there are some, visceral, primal things that can help us to better understand certain behaviors. But there's a lot to animals that is their own thing that humans don't really have a reference for, that we can't fully ever really understand. And, so at best, it can help us kind of appreciate animals or soften up
to certain animal groups. At its worst, it kind of negatively impacts animals and human-animal relations because, we project, all sorts of negative stuff onto species that otherwise, are just trying to survive or defend themselves or fear their lives. Yeah.
I know it's really hard to keep ants.
I maybe have a colony of like 200 Neoponera villosa, those really big hairy panther ants I was talking about. They got a pretty gnarly sting.
You gotta send me a picture of that.
Yeah, they're super cool though. But I've had that colony for like 3 years or something like that. I grew it from like I found trash in South Texas. It was like this big barrel with a bunch of like styrofoam inserts, and I could tell that there was an ant colony in there. And so I was like, well, we're kind of cleaning up a bunch of like trash and stuff, so I'm going to pull these styrofoam inserts out, and inside of there was like a mega colony of these hairy panther ants. Now keep in mind, super painfully stinging ants. And they're, maybe about 2 centimeters long. So they're like big ants. And so some friends and I kind of divvied a bunch of the colony up. And I went home with a queen and like 14 workers or something like that. And now that colony is probably, if I had to estimate, it's like at least 150 workers. But it's like this little, live planted vivarium. So it gets a little stressful sometimes because it's like full open door front. So like when I feed them or like have to spray in there from the plant, if I have to like wait for them to like crawl off the front and throw food in there and spray really fast and close it. Because if they get out and sting somebody, then I have to get rid of them. Is the rule that I have. And luckily so far I've had them for years and they haven't been out.
Well, now you've jinxed it.
I shouldn't have said that.
You're going to message me later and go, Alex, what did you do? They've escaped. You're just going to go back in there later.
Cats knocked the whole thing down.
Ant City.
Oh, that'd be horrible.
Oh, that would.
I got stung
for everyone involved
6 or 7 times when I first moved them into this enclosure because I collected them in a little container with soil.
Yeah, moving them into,
And so there a few more, I could see that they had thrown out a few cocoons. And so I knew that there was more workers. So I was like, all right, I'm going to build a little live planted display for them. Because it's a little easier with the bigger species because you don't have to like make everything real airtight or whatever because they're too big to fit through most of the gaps that smaller species might be able to. But yeah, moving them into that, I had a bunch of them crawl. They didn't sting me on my hands. They crawled up into my shirt, and then when I would move, they would sting my back.
Try and get them.
So I had they would get pinned with my shirt, which made them panic, and then they would sting my back. So, but it was like I couldn't really effectively do much of anything because I couldn't take my shirt off because then I would be stung a lot more. So I just had to kind of like just take it and wait.
Embrace.
Luckily, even though all my bites and stings over the years, I've not developed any sort of sensitivity or allergy or anything, which is good. I'd like to avoid being stung by them if I can help it because they are.
Of course, yeah. So what was your earliest memory of being captivated by wildlife and how did it shape your love for animals?
It's interesting because I think, as far back as I can remember, really, I was always going out and catching, bugs and lizards and toads and stuff like that. But when I was really little, maybe 3 or 4, living in Texas, on occasion, we get some strays from the monarch butterfly migration. And I was maybe 4 years old, and a monarch had shown up to my yard, my old house, and just landed on me, just on my hand. And
that's really cool.
Just sat there, didn't move. I guess was exhausted, from having traveled. And for 3 days, I kept, with the help, of course, of my mom being, 4 years old at the time, I kept it in a shoebox and nursed it with some sugar water. And on the 2nd or 3rd day, I took it out, We took it back out into the backyard, and I just had it on my hand, and at that point really didn't try and fly away, really hadn't done anything like that. Sat there for a few minutes and then just took off, flew up over the house and, just went away. And I think that was one of my earliest and like more intimate moments with wildlife.
That's beautiful. That's a really beautiful story.
And that was just part of me, just being really interested. And of course, I was just kind of a weird sort of, I assume weird for my parents, weird kid just going through. I mean, I would have
I was the same.
A pet wasp that I brought into the house that I kept in a cup and would hold. And I fed, broccoli off of the table, stuff like that. But it's like, thinking back now, like, it's just funny to just have had that hands-on experience of like, I was holding a wasp in my house, maybe a 4 or 5-year-old kid, and understanding, if I do it gently, it's not going to sting me, and not having this innate sort of, worry or fear about it. And so that's kind of that original sort of seed. Because of course I was fascinated by animals. I mean, as a kid, those are the first things I could do was make, what does a cow say? What does a lion say? I mean, it was just like interested in animals. Then of course, growing up pretty much in the golden era of, the early 2000s wildlife content with, Zaboomafoo and Steve Irwin, Jeff Corwin.
We were very lucky.
Even all the Animal Planet stuff. I mean, even going into my later, years in school, like River Monsters, some of like the Most Extreme, all these great programs that really just helped me kind of really get obsessed and foster an appreciation for wildlife is really, I think that I would have been on, a similar trajectory anyway. But there was a lot of those types of animal encounters and wildlife adventures and, media that I consumed that did help kind of like act as sort of a guide rail, to keep me from falling into the gutter, just keep me headed straight down the lane. For the most part, because it was just kind of like always, like the second I could walk, I was going out and catching bugs and lizards. The second I could do anything, it was just, that's what it's always been. Every birthday was, I want a lizard or a frog or a snake. I mean, it's just like, I can't think back to a time when I was like, real all in on playing sports or, even like video games kind of came as a second, second love in a sense to animals and wildlife. I was just always out in the creek, catching crawfish with, a little, end of a broken bottle that I found down there because I forgot to bring a container with me. I mean, just all that type of thing. And so it really gave me kind of a front row seat on that sort of tiny world that I feel like a lot of people just don't get to know at first, whether they grow up in a metropolitan area or whether they're, taught from a young age that stuff is gross and dirty. And a lot of people just miss out on that window. And, I didn't grow up in, the country anywhere or somewhere with like a bunch of crazy wildlife, but there was enough at my immediate disposal that, I was able to kind of cultivate that sort of, inquisitive nature, that sort of, intellectually hungry spirit in a sense of like, everything was interesting. Everything was new. It's fresh, and just being captivated and interested in it all. And that's really what kind of set me on course. Already an innate sort of built-in, love and appreciation for wildlife, but also just kind of a fostering of that, with the help, of course, of my parents as well. Particularly my mom, who didn't, who made an active, not attempt, but an active, stance to not jump or squirm at every single little thing I would have brought her. But to try and approach, some of these kind of creepier, crawlier things, more from my perspective, which I think helped, in those formative early years to just kind of not be a fearful, apprehensive kid about, what was immediately there for me to kind of glom onto. And that's probably, I mean, of course, I could go on, pick out 100 other instances where, that was solidified and other, big milestones. My first encounter my first venomous snake or, working with my first whatever, or traveling to my first, but it's just like those things just right at the early sort of genesis of, who I more or less am. It would probably be some of those instances really, between the ages of 3 and 4, probably, that was pivotal in my life trajectory up until this point.
No, that butterfly story, that's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a cracker, that is one. So speaking
Jeren
of,
was his name. That's what I named
Jerry.
Jeren. I was a kid, so I didn't know normal names.
Jeren, sorry.
Jeren with an N at the end.
Jeren.
Of
course.
O-N. Jeren the butterfly.
No, it was only because you cut out for a second just as you went. I heard Jer, and then I was like, Jerry.
It's like it's
Jeren.
just a name for a butterfly.
I'm gonna name my next animal Jeren.
4, it seems like
I love it.
Jeren.
It's a good Jeren. I'm gonna name
strong
I'm
name.
gonna name my next animal Jeren.
Perfect.
I think it shows strong character, a strong
right.
butterfly.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear the word Jeren, I think that is a solid butterfly right there.
That's right. The
biggest from now on, anyway. All the butterflies cowered in fear
Jeren.
of Jeren.
They thought he had fallen,
Jeren.
but he came back with a vengeance, full of
stronger
sugar
than ever, with a human companion.
That's right, a human familiar.
Hyper on sugar.
Yeah, true.
Sidekick. Oh, Jeren, we love you. Shout out to Jeren.
Shout out. Fly high, king.
The OG.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows, only time.
For sure.
Jack's Wildlife
Adventures. No, Jack's for Wildlife.
I was going to say, if we keep joking about this, then people are going to go, Jack's Wildlife Adventure, and put it in. I will take a screenshot of your socials, and when we say, Facebook, so people can see what it does actually look like, and it will be in the chapters. Where can we find you? So what advice would you give to someone looking to deepen their connection with nature and wildlife in their everyday life? Of course, it's kind of a broad question.
I would say, really, and this is something that I tell lots of people. And funny enough, I actually wrote an excerpt for a children's book, literally about this.
Ooh.
2 or 3 weeks ago or something like that. But the advice I would give.
That's really cool.
Is, I think a lot of people lose their opportunity, their supposed opportunity for adventure. And they do that to themselves. And it's because as we grow up, through various methods, and in the Western world specifically, we're kind of just taught to, kind of grow up, whatever that means. Like, you get older, you're supposed to just take on responsibilities. A regular person in society, doing all this stuff, it's cool while you're little. It's cool while you're a kid. If you do it, cool. Wash your hands before you eat dinner. As you grow up, this stuff, you shouldn't be worrying about it as much. It shouldn't be at the forefront of your life. Adventure is something, you go and stay at a resort in Mexico 5 days a year on your holiday, and that's all the adventure that an adult person needs in their life. And I always say, ridiculous. It's ridiculous, because adventure and nature, are everywhere. You are within 30 minutes at most of true, just unseen, unlimited, amazing stuff. And I tell people, you don't have to fly to some jungle on the other side of the world. Having adventurous moments in your day-to-day life, that could be stopping on the sidewalk to watch an ant, drag a really big dead insect across the sidewalk.
It's what you make it. Yeah.
And just stopping there, savoring
these adventurous moments is really important, but you have to be intentional about it, because you can so easily just say, oh, you know what? Like, I don't have time, or I'm a grown up. I've got to just keep walking. I don't have time to sit here and watch these bees just pack pollen onto their little
There's
legs and
always
fly
time.
away. It's essentially this fully fleshed out, articulated version of stop to smell the roses. Underneath our feet,
Yeah.
is millions of strands, networks of mycelium connecting plants, the soil full of just all these different types of bacteria and microorganisms and insects. I mean, it's just like an explosion of just some of the most amazing, intricate, and fantastic stuff on Earth. And people could say, man, I wish dinosaurs were still around, or I wish I could have been alive at this time, or I wish I could have seen this extinct creature or whatever. I mean, right now, I wish, I could meet aliens, or I could go to an alien planet. I'm like, there's so much stuff right here on this planet that is bizarre. I mean, you could make an entire alien movie out of just stuff that happens here on this planet. It would be unrecognizable to the average person. Adventure is there, and you can access it no matter where you are. Whether you're in some metropolitan area and you're watching, a pigeon, pick avian lice out of its feathers, while you're eating, at a little patio or something. Like there's all this stuff. I mean, and that's something that's been really nice for me, like getting into ants and smaller things and stuff like that, because it's easy, to go to these crazy places that I go to and be like, all right, what I need to see is a saltwater crocodile or a cassowary while I'm here in Queensland, or a platypus. And of course, I went and did and saw all those things. But sometimes that little stuff is just as exciting. And you don't have to be going way out of your way to stop and look. You're eating at a restaurant, and inside, they've got a little monstera plant in their restaurant, and you look closely and you see a little trail of black little monomorium ants, moving all the way up to the top because somebody, splashed a little bit of their drink on one of the top leaves, and they're living their whole little life. And so it's just like when
it's so good for your mental health as well. Like
absolutely.
nature and animals and getting out there,
getting out into nature, but not just surrounding yourself with nature, but becoming intimate with nature. Like stopping and being a part of it for a second. You know what I mean? Even something like being, I don't know, bitten by a mosquito. We forget that we are animals and we are part of the network of life on this planet, whether we remove ourselves on, for the most of the time or not. Because once you're out in nature, the mosquito doesn't look at you any different than it would, a deer or a fox or a squirrel or something. You're part of that, and your nutrients that it's stealing, a bat could come by and gobble up that mosquito, and your DNA and your essence, can be floating around in this intimate relationship with nature. And it's not, yes, it's annoying and sometimes even dangerous for, certain insects to bite us, and, they can spread disease and stuff like that. But it's all part of what it means to be part of an organism on this essentially gigantic planetary organism that we're all a part of. We really are all in this sort of adventure together, regardless of walk of life, regardless of where you come from, regardless of your background. We're all part of the same species that owes our development, our life, our species history to this planet and its resources. And this is our home. This should be one of the most intimate relationships we could have. And not, you don't have to, necessarily be, in a kind of religious relationship with the planet or anything like that, but just to understand that this is what we're made out of, what we're a part of. It's an intimate thing. And so I think any little bit to remind ourselves of that is furthering that connection, is forging a way for adventure. And it makes you care about not just the health of the planet, not just, how much we rely on this planet and on each other to survive, but it helps us to just know that we're rooted in to this web of life and the evolutionary history of this planet. And I think for me, that's my advice, is 100%. To go out every day, be intentional about remembering how connected we are to this planet. Because most people just go throughout their lives, spraying their house for bugs and keeping everything sterile. They don't go outside. They're not interested in that type of thing. But it's like we are a product of the planet that we live on. And we are intimately connected with this planet, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And when we remind ourselves of that, there's really nothing that can beat that. So it's the advice is to be intentional about adventuring and furthering the connection with not just the planet and nature, as this nebulous thing, but furthering our understanding of ourselves as an extension of life on this planet and not as an outsider looking in, because we're a part of it. And when we immerse ourselves in nature, remembers, and it just welcomes us back in. We're the same to those mosquitoes, to the little ticks, that think they're getting an easy meal. To the plants that detach their seeds in our pants to try and get us to disperse. I mean, we're the same thing. I mean, we're just living, breathing organisms to that. And so that's my advice really, is to just remember that and be intentional about remembering that, because it's easy to forget that, get caught up in day-to-day crazy human being life. But it's good to pull yourself back a little bit and not take yourself so seriously all the time and just be like, I'm just, big old amalgam of cells, just like that deer over there and whatever. It's like I've got responsibilities and stuff I, sometimes I'd rather not have. But to the planet, you're the same as you've ever been, basically, and it's cool that we get to focus our experience through the lens of being a human being, because, so many animals, while perfectly at one with nature, they can't sit there to really soak in and appreciate and understand just how intricate and webbed and everybody is to each other.
I was going to say, there's nothing quite like, when the wind just hits your face in the right way. That's such a good feeling. That's a great, or like when you're just standing and you actually, you think about how grass feels under your feet, and just how it just really think and appreciate that. Or it's just, it's one thing to lay in bed and listen to the rain. It's another thing to lay in bed and listen to the rain.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was doing it the other day, and I'm listening to it now, and I'm just thinking like how calm you feel, because as a person with ADHD, especially at night, my brain kind of just never stops. But at night, it's sort of you're trying to wind down, and something like that is really helpful. I mean, I still can't sleep or whatever. It's not a cure. It would be great if it was. But it really helps you to, I guess it's grounding. You're grounding yourself.
For sure. Well, and two, in a sense, that's the type of thing that sort of I touched on a little bit, before, like evolutionarily speaking, as pursuit hunter animals, that we were incredibly dependent on rain for much of our, evolutionary history. So that smell and that sound and that feeling of rain is security. We know we're gonna be okay. We're gonna have enough water. We're that resource that is up in the air sometimes. So it's almost a primal, cradling effect, of Mother Nature just saying it's okay type of thing, where it's still, having relied on these types of natural systems for so many, generations throughout our evolutionary history. You don't even realize that there's a true physical response to some of these natural phenomena, because again, we for the most part are fairly removed. We're not still
watching a storm. I love watching a storm.
But it's like, again, it's like some of those things, it's just like, that's just so special too, to just think about human history.
Really appreciate
and how, how of course privileged we are. But then, to also just think back, to the point of perspective of, our ancestral lineages, where, we very much were struggling in survival, and many people of course still are. But, just some of those primal, deep rooted you know, just in our genetic history, just the way we're shaped, the way we move, you know, there are still those little anchors to existence on this planet, you know, that still have very real, you know, strings to pull, you know, even in our own bodies, whether we, you know, understand that or not. So it's just a matter of, you know, but, you know, a lot of people, they just might not know. They might say, oh, you know, it's just, but it's just like, man, I can't imagine.
Hopefully someone will listen to this.
And being ignorant of that, in the sense that you're just missing out on some of that, just that little pocket of like,
yeah, it really is missing out. Yeah,
you can't savor it as much when you don't.
Well, hopefully some people will listen to this and then they'll say, oh, that sounds nice, I'll try that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they'll really appreciate it. It's grounding and it's meditation, I suppose, as well, because you're really focusing on it and you're really thinking about how it feels and connecting your body back with nature. And it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
There's one black hole behind you.
One black hole behind me. I have one black cat here. There's another one that's sitting over there. So this is Lilo, which is my girl cat, and over on the couch is Obi. And then I have that
Obi-Wan.
His name is Kenobi, actually, but we just call him Obi because that fits him better. He's a little bit chaotic. Obi. And then I've got that colony of all those Neoponera velosa, all those hairy panther ants. My most recent creature, which I bought literally like 2 weeks ago, something like that, maybe a week and a half ago.
What happened to downsizing?
I'm selling my frogs, but this was one that I wanted in my. I'm trying to find a good picture. Oh, it's so cute. I have this little baby. This is my baby Gila monster that I bought. If you can even tell.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell, but I can after you say it.
But I haven't even named it yet. It's so soon after getting it. But when we went to Arizona at the end of August,
you know what you need to call
last month, I was like, oh my gosh, we finally found Gila monsters in the wild, because I've been out 2 other times and not seen a single one. Our first day looking, we got 2 that morning. So we went literally and got Gila monsters tattoos that exact day. And then we ended up finding 3 more in the 2 days following. So we found a total of 5 Gila monsters after not finding any on the trips before. And so I was already like, man, I kind of miss having a monster. Like, it was so cool seeing them in the wild and stuff. Like, birthday's on Tuesday. So I was like, you know what? Early birthday present for myself. I've got the skull tattooed. We just found 5 in the wild. I'm just going to buy one. Yep, the first. I'm number 1.
Number 1.
One, baby, number 1.
Yeah, no. Oh, they're so cool.
But
you know what you have to call it? What was the name of the butterfly? The best name ever? Which I've forgotten.
Oh, Jeren.
You have to call it Jeren. You have to call it Jeren.
It'll be put into the pool of names.
No, you have to call it Jeren.
Well, I have a feeling that it might be a female. So I have to try and...
It doesn't matter. It's a unisex name.
All of my names, I feel like, are too brutish for the elegant lizard she will become. So I'm trying to meditate on the name. The longer I go, the more I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to name it yet.
I'm kind of hoping I'm just ingraining it in your brain now, and you just associate it with a lovely butterfly.
My wife has been trying to do the same thing, because she wants me to name it Rumple, short for like Rumpelstiltskin.
Rumple.
So she only
refers
as Rumple. She goes, "Oh, Rumple was out today," and I said, "Stop calling it Rumple. I'm naming it Rumple." Yes, I've got. They're more like my breeding stock, not really necessarily like pets. And I'm working on maybe selling them this month. But I have a male and female, my breeder pair of large form redhead histrionica is what they're called. Harlequin dart frogs.
And they're really cool. I used to have heaps
Really?
of dart frogs, but they're my last group. When I just travel too much to keep up with the frogs. They're more sensitive than the lizard and stuff and the ants. But my female just raised the most babies she's ever raised at a time, because that genus Ufaga, which is the genus that these dart frogs are in,
Ufaga.
Ufaga means egg.
Sounds like a German swear word.
Right, doesn't it? So like the double O at the beginning means egg, and then Faga means like to eat. And so it refers to the female actually lays infertile eggs for the tadpoles to eat. So I can't pull the tadpoles out of the tank and raise them myself. So it inflates the cost of the frogs, because the female has to be properly supplemented and, has to be really healthy in order to raise frogs. So normally they really only raise like 1, 2, or 3 at a time for the large obligates, which is short for obligate egg feeder. Because there are smaller ones like this little blue gene, which maybe some people are familiar with. That's Ufaga pamilia, which is a much smaller species. They're maybe about 2.5 centimeters long, about an inch long. So they're small, but the large obligates, which are the bigger ones, obviously bigger tadpoles, they eat more eggs. So I've never had her produce more than 4 at a time. And this last time she produced 6 at a time, which is a lot for that species. So that's pretty stinking cool.
Impressive. She is
Very
an impressive gal.
She is a wonder. She is truly, a testament
Big up to her.
kind. That's right. She's full of eggs all the time, big, juicy, healthy eggs that she feeds all of her babies, and they grow very fat, large, and healthy, which is awesome.
Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me under the name Jack's World of Wildlife on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and most importantly, YouTube. I release full-length videos on YouTube, which are like my preferred type of content, and then I release mostly like short-form stuff on all the other apps that I use. But yeah, it's those 4 that are my main ones. I'm a little slow on Instagram, Facebook right now, just because I haven't had a highly productive trip recently to really drum up a lot of new stuff. But I'm headed to Australia in a month and a half for the longest trip I've taken since 2019. So I should have so much content. People will be drowning in it. And so I'll have plenty of stuff for people to watch.
Bring your goggles, bring a snorkel.
Yeah, we're going to be pooling for blue ring octopus. We're going out into the outback for inland taipans. I know I meant looking for all sorts of crazy stuff. Echidnas, koalas.
Be careful of those.
Be careful of the taipans. That's right. Should be good. I'll probably be fine. Down under. See all my mates. Get out into the bush. Find some spiders and snakes.
G'day.
Stuff like that. But nice. Should be good.
That sounds good.
Ready to go.
That sounds good. Crikey.
Pumped for it. Pumped for it. It's a lot harder to not curse using an Australian accent, because it's like half of the vocabulary there.
It is.
Really and truly. It's like, just doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right if you're not using any expletives.
Some womas and call them Bruce and Sheila.
Womas. See, I almost cursed there. Oops.
Woma.
Friendly, family friendly.
I love womas. Womas are awesome.
Who knows? I'm at the whim of Mother Nature.
That's what I say. I love it. I love saying that. I'll allow it.
I'll allow it.
Or when someone asks you for a favor and you'll be like, I'll allow it. Yeah, I just love saying that to people. It's funny. Cool.
Remember.
Jack, thank you. Yep. Jack's World of Wildlife. Check him out on social media and you will be in for a treat. I can highly, highly recommend. Jack, thank you so much for your time today. It has been 3 or 4 or 5 hours of really good fun. The first 3 were, or 2, or I don't know, but I'm very tired and it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'll be so together at the beginning of the episode, and then it just gradually decline in brain in brain speed. But
Slowly
it's been a pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more exciting episodes. And until next time, stay wild. Bye.
Later.
Later, Gator.
Later.